Welcome everyone to Module 4. In Module 4, it's going to be an interesting chapter, and it's going to be focusing on the role of basically how we're going to introduce macroeconomics. You're going to see a lot of topics that we cover in this chapter. We're going to be really focusing on more of it later on. So I think it'll be a very interesting chapter to get a foundation of what we might see later on. So for this week, you're going to focus on the role of GDP, which is going to be a big basis for the economics, and more specifically macroeconomics. You're going to find that this is the basis how we study macroeconomics. The GDP is a means of measuring the economic success of a country. It's determined by calculating the output of the country by what is being produced by four main components: consumers, businesses, the government, and international sector. When we look at the measurement, you're going to look at ways to calculate GDP. And there's two main ways that we calculate it. We calculate it through real and nominal GDP. Real GDP is evaluating the output level fluctuations while holding the price constant. Whereas nominal GDP is evaluating both price and output fluctuations. When we look at this measurement, it's calculated based on basically four types of spending amounts or expenditures. The first is personal consumption, which is most important aspect in figuring a country's GDP. And it's the total sum of all goods and services that are brought in, or that are purchased and bought in a country. The second expenditure is investments, which includes available, unsold inventories, fixed assets of a business. It's not investing in stocks and bonds, which a lot of people maybe get confused about. Fixed assets are buildings, machines, and things necessary for running businesses that we can easily turn into cash. And in the announcement section, you'll see I have a really interesting video on GDP and how to evaluate GDP and what it looks at. Now, some types of questions that you might see on the test that could be helpful. Okay? You might not see all of them, but I just wanted to remind you of some of the helpful things on how to do well on the quiz. You get one attempt at the quiz. It's 20 multiple choice questions. When you start the quiz, you have to end it. The clock will always continue. So you only get one attempt to do well. So make sure that when you start it that you're ready, because a lot of people get confused about that. Now, some questions that you could see on the quiz. Negative and positive demand shocks, which is looking at fluctuations in either demand, which is buyers' behavior, or supply, which is dealing with supply, which we could look at Hurricane Katrina. That was a negative supply shock. Another question, banks and financial institutions, what's their main goal when looking at the economy? Question 3 is evaluating modern economic growth and how has it looked over time when looking at population. Question 4 is looking at investments, and it's more specifically looking at to increase investment, what do you have to do? Do you buy things? Do you save things? How does it relate to savings? Question 5 is looking at the stickiness of prices. And I'm going to give you 4 different types of goods if you get this type of question, and which one is least sticky. Question 6 is going to be looking at the higher rates of unemployment. What is that linked to in our economy when you have high rates of unemployment? Question 7 is going to be evaluating, you want to increase current level of investment, but what do you have to give up? So if I want to consume more, I should say it this way. If I want to invest more in our economy, I'm going to have to give up sacrificing consumption now. Question 8 is going to be looking at the role of savings and how it influences decisions that we have to make. Question 9 is going to be looking at inflation and how do we define inflation. Inflation is going to be a big thing that we're going to talk about later on. Question 10 is going to focus on the study of macroeconomics and what does it focus on. Question 11 is going to be looking at prices and why they might be very sticky sometimes. Why is it hard for them to actually adjust? So in question 11 and 10, you're going to be focused on the stickiness of prices. Question 13 is going to be looking at the definition of real GDP. What are some examples of real GDP? What is it measuring? But make sure to know that the price is corrected for, or it's stabilized, or it doesn't change. Question 14 is going to be looking at savings. And how do we actually achieve savings? In a personal way, we achieve savings if we don't spend as much as our income. We've achieved savings. 15 is looking at shocks to the economy. And how do shocks influence our economy? So you're going to get probably 3 questions on shocks and types of shocks. Another question you're going to be looking at is business cycles. When you look at the business cycle, you're going to see a lot of fluctuations in our economy. And how does the business cycle influence decisions that we have to make in terms of output and employment? Question 19 is going to be looking at unemployment and focusing on the role of unemployment and how it influences things that we have to do. And question 20 looks at primary concerns in macroeconomics. What are some challenges that we're facing in macroeconomics? And how do we deal with those specific challenges? As always, if you need any help on any of the concepts, just let me know. But everything is due on Saturday night. You get 1 attempt at the quiz, and it's only on Chapter 6. And I look forward to your effort this week.